Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to Bloomberg UK Politics, your bite-sized guide to the corridors of power. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Yuan. Now, I don't know about you, Caroline, but it feels like the election campaign's really shifted up a gear this week. The battle buses were officially unveiled and sent on their respective odysseys around the country. We've had the first televised debate, which most polls point to being a bit of a dead heat. And, of course, a row about Labour's tax plans. So I reckon that's almost a full house in general election bingo. Oh, wait, I've forgotten one. Nigel Farage, of course, upending proceedings, announcing that he will indeed be standing for election and that he's taking over as leader of Reform UK.
OK, look, you've got your bingo card. I'm much more focused on things like party donations. That's right up my kind of business agenda. In terms of the official donation figures for all the parties they dropped this morning, the headline, of course, was that the Tories accepted an additional £5 million from the businessman Frank Hester. As a reminder, the Conservative donor was accused of making racist and sexist comments about Diane Abbott. He then apologised for them as being rude. But this adds also to the criticism of Rishi Sunak, who's been heavily attacked for his line against Labour about raising taxes by £2,000 per household. And then the other thing that I was watching was the Lib Dem leader, Ed Davey, really getting traction on social media. And I'm not surprised, frankly. It was very personal, all about his commitment to social care. It was a lot of him talking to camera and being interviewed about his life, and lots of video actually of him with his disabled son. Very, very moving. I must say, I watched it.
Loads to chew over. Luckily, it is Thursday, so that means we have our election panel with us today. Joining us again this week, Alice Perry, former chair of Labour's National Executive Committee, Chris Wilkins, former speechwriter to Theresa May, and Luisa Porritt, former Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament. Welcome all to the podcast. Now, I want to start with what's been going on with that TV debate. About 5 million people tuned in this time, down 2 million on last time. But maybe it's more important what happens to all those clips on social media. I'd just like to get your thoughts on who's winning the online battle so far. Alice?
Thank you very much. So I guess it depends on your own algorithms, because social media is an echo chamber. And I know that I'll probably be getting a lot of Labour clips, but the others will be getting clips from their respective parties as well. As you say, those clips on social media probably matter more than the debate itself. TikTok's really interesting. Labour are by far ahead in million views on TikTok. But interestingly, the second most popular party on TikTok by quite some distance is actually Reform. And that is quite notable and interesting, particularly if it's skewing to a younger demographic and fitting in with what we're seeing in the West and across America and Europe as well. So Labour have been putting a lot of effort into rebuttals and the social media digital campaign. There was a big meeting for digital campaigners right before the TV debates. But Labour also spent some time with the Democrats before the election, and their advice was to just be really wary of social media and knowing things like Nextdoor can shift local opinion. But like, if Twitter or X won you elections, then Jeremy Corbyn would be Prime Minister.
OK. Chris, perhaps you can give us your view then on the Conservative take on it, maybe. I mean, Rishi Sunak, of course, is not averse to having a little go, doing videos on TikTok and so on. How much do you think their campaign is cutting through? And it's really quite difficult to know that at this point, don't you think?
I think it's really difficult to know. And in the past, the Conservatives have really prided themselves on their digital expertise and claimed, for example, things going back to the 2015 election, which was a bit of a surprise result. They attributed a lot of that to the sort of micro-targeting on Facebook, etc. But I don't think anyone really knows how accurate that is. The interesting thing about social media, as Alice has just kind of hinted at, is the different channels, different things. So the Conservatives spent a lot of time on X, what was Twitter, but really that's about shaping the Westminster conversation, because journalists are on X, and so it's kind of what they see. Actually getting to voters is more about TikTok and things like that these days. And as was said, Labour are sort of far ahead of that. And I think the Conservatives historically have been very proud of their digital campaign. I think to some extent the agenda has moved on a little, and it seems to me that they're still using some techniques from previous campaigns and maybe aren't quite up to speed. But that's because ultimately their core voters they're targeting in this election campaign, as we've seen from their strategy, are people who aren't really on those channels. They are people who are still turning to the Telegraph every morning or the mainstream media. So it's less of a channel for the Conservatives anyway because of the people that they're actually aiming at.
Louisa, so much of the Lib Dem campaign is super local. It's about the ground war. How well are the Lib Dems doing in terms of online in that ground war?
I think we're doing really well with the online campaign this time around. I mean, I think the thing to bear in mind as well is it's not just an online campaign. The images that we're seeing, they're used on broadcast. They also get used in the print newspapers. And that's really powerful. So we've obviously seen Ed Davey having a lot of fun. I do think he's winning the campaign from that perspective. But we've also, as you mentioned, Caroline, seen his serious side and a lot of humanity from Ed that we've not really seen from other politicians in this campaign. He's really opened up about his personal life and experiences, made himself vulnerable, which is a brave thing to do in, a very high-profile general election campaign, talking about raising his disabled son, about caring for his parents when he was a child. His grandparents were carers to him, and then he cared for his grandmother later on. So he's really been a carer all his life, and ever since Ed became the leader, he has put support for carers at the heart of the Liberal Democrats campaigning. And I think he's found, and the team of people around him have found very clever ways to bring that to life, both Ed letting cameras in to see what his day-to-day life is like and talk about that, very relatable experiences, but also going to a care home and sitting alongside the residents there and drumming along to We Will Rock You. I think he's shown a side of himself that, I've known for a long time, but I don't think the public have had an opportunity to get to know. And that's been really refreshing to see.
Alice, I want to ask you about the big talking point of the last couple of days. That is, of course, the Tory attack on Labour's tax plans. Now, this is as predictable as Labour attacking the Tories over the NHS. It's something that happens in every election. Do you think that Labour was prepared for this? There's been some criticism that Keir Starmer didn't rebut it robustly enough in the debate.
So Labour did try and rebut it live via social media, but you're right, in the debate Keir was being very polite and trying to avoid speaking over Rishi Sunak and the presenter and so on. As I was saying last week, one of the things Labour know the Conservatives will try and do in this election is introduce an idea of peril, that it's too dangerous to change. You've got to stick with what you know, because Labour, can you trust them on the economy, defence, immigration? So Labour know these are like the three kind of core metrics they need to go for. That's why you saw Keir Starmer flanked with Labour's veteran candidates a few days ago and so on. So Labour are aware that those attacks are coming. They're trying to be very upfront with the tax reforms they're planning and, making sure the manifesto is fully costed. And you're seeing the Conservatives starting to put forward policies that maybe aren't as costed as the ones that Labour are trying to stick to. But that does create challenges, because if you're thinking ahead to what you do in government, there's then that, well, how can you inspire and excite people in a very challenging economic and geopolitical environment? It is challenging for Labour, but at the same time, it's better probably to put forward something that is credible and you can stick to when you're in government. But interestingly, there was that poll for the FT that said that voters believed whoever won the election, taxes would need to go up. And it might be that they're aware of the tough circumstances the UK's in.
Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. I mean, speaking about the tax issue then, I mean, I was reading Jeremy Hunt's piece in The Telegraph also that came overnight about the family home tax guarantee. So the kind of, again, this idea that Keir Starmer is playing the public for fools was how he put it in the op-ed. Chris, I wonder what you think it's been like for the Conservatives. I mean, surely they'll be reasonably happy with the last couple of days of coverage. Lots of controversy though about the Labour tax rise figure, but it's been how have the last couple of days been for the Conservatives, do you think?
I think it's an interesting dynamic in the Conservative camp this week, because on the one hand, I agree, I think they are happy with the past couple of days. They think on a campaigning basis, they're winning the campaign. They're sort of setting the agenda, their policies are sort of leading the media most days. They've put Labour on the back foot on tax over the past couple of days, as you say, and they keep hammering that. They're doing all the things that the Conservatives have traditionally been very good at in campaigns, and they think they're winning the campaign. The problem is, it's not making any difference. And
sorry, to
if you look
cut
at the
in,
polls,
Chris, I'm going to cut in and just say, Nigel Farage, hang on a second. How can you be so positive when the YouGov poll, Reform only a couple of points behind the Tories?
Exactly. So that's the disconnect. Just saying, they think they are delivering their campaign strategy, and they think they are doing that effectively. The problem is, it's not making any difference. And actually, I think Monday of this week in particular was, I think, probably one of the darkest days for the Conservative Party in recent years, because you had two things at once. You had a couple of MRP polls that were released on Monday, the YouGov one, another by More in Common, both of which showed a really heavy defeat for the Conservatives and a large majority for the Labour Party. And on the same day, Nigel Farage made his intervention about coming back into politics, standing for a seat, taking over the leadership of Reform UK, which is pretty disastrous for the Conservative Party. So on Monday, it was a pretty deflated camp, and there is this disconnect. They think, look, we're doing all the things that we should be doing. We're winning the campaign. You know, everything is working from a campaign point of view, but it's not moving the dial and nothing is changing. And as a result, I think panic is starting to set in the Conservative camp.
Louisa, I want to ask you about those MRP polls. On the face of it, great news for the Lib Dems. I know there'll be lots of excitement at projections of 40 or even 50 seats for the party to take. But isn't that a problem for the party? Because when you don't target and you spread your resources around, you can end up missing things that you should have won in the first place.
Well, you've hit on a really key point there, Yuan, which is about targeting. And the Lib Dems have really learnt the lessons of the 2019 campaign. We targeted too many seats in that election. I think lots of people have admitted that now. Arguably, we were in a very difficult position in that election. You had Boris Johnson on the one hand and Jeremy Corbyn on the other. So we had to offer a real alternative. But as a result of that, and it being a Brexit election, we spread ourselves too thinly. Whereas this time, there's been a very, very disciplined approach to which seats are being targeted. It's quite a narrow list, which we've been working for a number of years now. And actually, the places where the Liberal Democrats are concentrating are predominantly seats where the party is second to the Conservatives, second based on 2019 results, but also places where we've run the council for a long time, for example, and there's those resources and infrastructure locally, so that when that moment comes, as it generally does in general elections, where the Liberal Democrats and other parties tend to get a bit squeezed by the Labour on the one hand and the Conservatives on the other, the party will be in a much more robust position to defend those positions. And having selected candidates actually a number of years ago and been working those seats and building profile for a long time, I think we're in a much stronger position than then. And we will make gains in this election. I can say that with absolute confidence. The exact range, that is going to be up to the voters, obviously, and hard to tell. We've also seen what overexcitement can lead to. And even in 2010, you know, the high of I agree with Nick Clegg, we ended up with 56 seats, which wasn't as high as was being predicted at the time. So I just exercise that bit of caution while also being optimistic.
Okay, yeah, hard to tell. I think, yes, that's certainly amidst all the kind of excitement around the polling seems to be something that all the parties are thinking about. Thank you so much for being with us today. That is Luisa Porritt, the former Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament, Alice Perry, former chair of Labour's National Executive Committee, and Chris Wilkins, who is former speechwriter to Theresa May, and of course part of our regular panel here on Bloomberg UK Politics. It's been really good to speak to you and catch up with you. I bet there'll be plenty more next week.
Well, that's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo. Our audio engineer was Sean Grastamakia. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Yuan Potts. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.